What are we talking about today?
Product and the problems that are our biggest annoyances.
It's the Agile Podcast. We are here talking about the frustrations of product. That's the whole episode. So thanks all you Agile coaches. Good night. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to like us.
Thanks for coming.
Like us.
So all things product today.
All things product. Yeah, we talked about the ideas here and ranked them. And when I say we ranked them, I mean Tricia told us what we're going to be talking about.
I did.
And the first stop on this train is the source of ideas. Where the ideas come from. Number one frustration in product.
It depends on what kind of company I think that you work for. They can all come from the top. The CEO tells you exactly what you're going to do, and you are just kind of the product person that's doing his bidding, or you are a product company and they think that the responsibility is 100% on product and you have to come up with every idea and it's your job to vet those ideas, your job to do the product market fix. So I think it can go either way and neither one are right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Neither one are right. It's just whatever fits best in your company's culture, I suppose. I mean, it could even be customers where they come from. Like, for example, if you have annual user conferences, right? Normally the companies are there for their own selfish interest to show off products, but that's a perfect opportunity to just solicit ideas. What do the customers actually want? What do they need? And then bring that back into the house.
Absolutely. And I think that also you need to tap into other people in the company, marketing, technology, obviously. What about the people, if you're doing internal stuff, the people downstream where your product is an internal product? Are you talking to those people? Are you talking to the finance people? Are you talking to help desk people? I think that too much is put on one person, whether it be the CEO always coming up with all the ideas or the product person. And I think that it takes a village, just like raising children.
Yeah, this is the nice thing is that all these ideas that we voted on came out of the Marty Kagan book, and the nice thing about the Marty Kagan book, and again, we in the previous podcast where I was like, all right, I suggest someone who's having real frustrations with the organization, they should, a Scrum Master, not a product person, you should go out and read that book, the Inspired book by Marty Kagan, because I was like, have you never been exposed to the idea that all of your hypotheses? What is it, plural? Hypotheses. All of your hypotheses that come in to product, there should be some sort of prerequisite that they are tested in some way, shape, or form before the product manager commits to using development resources to do them. And what we're talking about now, the source of ideas, if you implement that in your culture, this whole who the source of ideas thing goes away.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is this is like real highbrow for what I'm saying. Like a lot of people are like, Brian, how could I possibly do that when I work for the development manager and the development manager just tells me like work on whatever I tell you because I'm your boss, ha 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 ha, and like they're gonna like ha ha ha, but they're really gonna fire me if I tell them we're not gonna spend a bunch of development time working on that because no users are gonna use that. You don't like that's not the real problem. That's not the business problem people have. That's not the right solution or whatever. Like you're never gonna even engage in that discussion. You're never even going to challenge that person because you are not aligned properly in the organization to challenge that person's assumptions. That's what we're talking about now. We're talking about challenging assumptions.
So you mentioned development. So oftentimes, unfortunately, developments tend to be those that pull developers into a direction. And that to me is building the product right. But building the right product is a different question altogether, right? This is where we need the ideas from all and sundry. And development should not be excluded, but it should also not be the only source, obviously. Even in technology companies.
Agreed. And the only other thing I can say, because I know this happens a lot, is if you continually work for a CEO that has the idea and you are a product person that is only known to execution, you're going to struggle finding a new job and branching out to a position where you are encouraged to come up with ideas because you've been shut down for 10 years in your career and now all of a sudden people are asking you for your ideas. So maybe there is a space for it to be, whether it's right or wrong, we're always going to have a CEO that has their opinions, and there's always going to be at least one company out there where the CEO runs the show, and there's product people out there that fit that mold and that kind of company. So I think as you're interviewing and you're going around as a product person, you've got to make sure that your type of being a product manager fits with the type of CEO or the type of company that it is.
Yeah, I like that you went down that road first, that I didn't have to go down that road first. A lot of the CEOs that I've worked with in my career, I don't think of them as the efficient operator that the organization employs, because they know how to roll out a strategy to enact their broad vision in their mind. But again, a lot of the CEOs that I work with, they've really been also in the founder role. So they're not the best people to be an operator. They need to employ people that operate on their behalf, rather than that's their role, is that they're great at implementing and rolling things out, but maybe they don't have the whole overall vision. I don't think of the person that sits in the role of CEO as that person. I think of them as more like unbound by like any kind of process, or held back by any kind of our current way of structure. Like we aren't rigged to carry out that kind of whatever, man. Like that's what I want to do. I kind of find it cool. Like the bonus of being a product is I get to straddle those two worlds of I have to operate a little bit, and I get to play in the world of coming up with an uncompromising vision for a little bit, and I get to play on both sides. I'll play the role.
You play the role, Brian.
Play the role.
But on the product side, though, whatever it is, whatever the product is, has to fit into the bigger organizational strategy, right? So sometimes I've seen cases where brilliant product people will just take a product and run with it, which is great, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't jive with the overall vision of the organization, so it becomes a one-off. I know I've overused the example of Boeing in the past, and especially just lately, I've been thinking more about this, with their 737 MAX, which was rushed out, and yeah, it was just a time to market thing. Gotta get there, right? And of course, they all ended up being grounded. The CEO got fired.
That's true, though. I think that when people are coming up with ideas, a lot of the time they don't even have the vision of the company or the strategy of what the company is, or their objectives or whatever, and they just come up with ideas and they take it and run with it, and then all of a sudden, millions of dollars later, they're like, it doesn't even fit. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, they have no strategy to do any discovery work. That's kind of the, if you come up with an idea and you tell me that, we need to build this feature for this customer, I don't know what my opinion really is on this, because I would say almost every company I've ever worked for had some level B2B where you're trying to sell somebody. So sales is like, well, in order to sell this customer, we have to create this new feature or whatever, because they say they'll only sign if they have this because a competitor has it or something, stuff like that. And I'm kind of okay with that more now than I was early in my career, because I kind of understand, to me, internal stakeholders are more important because I have to maintain a relationship and live with those people every day than external stakeholders. Let me box the problem in a little bit more with this analogy. I have two stakeholders in B2B software, classic B2B software. The actual end user and the person that pays the bills. I have to make both of them happy. But I have to make one happier than the other. Or maybe I don't need to make one happier than the other. Making one very happy, delighted, I don't know. Making one of them very happy will hopefully have synergy with the other one, where the other one will be happy and will pay the bill. I have to make both of them happy.
Right.
It's the same way with internal a stakeholder who's trying to sell a customer. If I develop a feature for this customer that sales is trying to sell to, I make both sales happy and I make the customer happy.
If they buy.
Yeah, if they buy, and I'll push back.
If they buy, yeah.
Well, not just that. That was Om's pushback. I think that works when sales is heavily tied in with product. If you have a salesperson out there that doesn't really get your product, doesn't understand what the customers need, he could be selling a feature that has absolutely no business being in your product.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're wrangling with a sales guy who's now promised something that you absolutely are not going to build. And then what do you do?
Yeah.
So I think that it's very, very important when you're relying on salespeople that they understand the vision. It's posted somewhere, and that way you never run into that issue.
Yeah.
Sell a product for something that we already have on the roadmap. Perfect. But don't sell a feature that we have no intention of ever building.
Yeah, I can share an anecdote around that. So I think that's talking to what I was saying earlier about, it fitting into the organizational vision, right? So years ago, I was at a trade show, orchestrating a trade show for a technical company. And it's a week-long affair. Some important overseas clients coming in on day 4. The sales guys jumping up and down going, I talked to them. This is what they want to see. Do we do that? Nope, we don't do that. But we could. Well, we have to look into it. No, we have to show them something. Smoke and mirrors as we know it today. We were working a rapid prototype model. So he had us spin something up that only does certain things if you press specific buttons on the screen. And so the demo person, they had to be prepped. Don't hit anything else. And we did that. And of course, the customer thought we have this feature. Of course, we don't. They signed. And now we're on an extremely aggressive delivery timeline. The salesperson is washing his hands off of that. He's saying that's delivery. That's not me. I've done the sale now.
I sold.
It's like, yeah. And of course, unfortunately, the compensation model was when you sell, you get your money. So he's often gone with his money, and the rest of us are just basically left trying to make this customer happy. Classic case of how not to do things.
Absolutely.
The slick transition here would be to point out usually this kind of stuff happens when you're a product manager and the roadmap is kind of out of your control. So the roadmap is served down to you. So it's like the sales talk to the CEO, and the CEO talk to whoever, and whoever talk to whoever, and now this item's on the roadmap. Oh, we need to get integration with whatever in Q2 because it's on the roadmap now because whatever, we got to make some sales or some nonsense like that. So a big item on the agenda is I don't know if it's really roadmaps are the problem or unreasonable roadmap or roadmap. I don't really know what the real problem is with roadmaps. That's kind of where I'm going with it. Like roadmaps kind of are like falling out of favor right now in product management. Like,
really?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This is like a trend in product management.
So what's coming up taking its place?
I don't know.
I think that it in some instances can be like an oxymoron to Agile. I have yet to follow a roadmap past 2 months.
Sure.
I mean, but how much time do you spend actually building that roadmap?
Yeah.
Is it worth the time that you spend building it only to just throw it away in 2 months and be like, because I think there's companies out there, especially startups, that have their ideas and then they just throw them away because they need to sell. So now you're just taking on all your customers' ideas, and your actual vision for the roadmap is just toast.
Right, and the flip side of that is people just really put so much effort to detail and attention on a roadmap with milestones on it, and then it becomes an expectation, and they say this is failure to perform because you didn't do something that was a guesstimate to begin with.
That's exactly right.
So there's a happy medium somewhere in there, right? Somewhere in there's got to be a happy medium.
Yeah,
I think this is going to tailwind into this whole discussion that we've had in the past about budgeting, because roadmaps often are a result of, or not a result, but they're a prerequisite to budgeting. Especially the year-on-year type of model that's so prevalent out there.
I could see this being a sticking point if you have customers that are paying for items on your roadmap. Then that's a whole different element of what we're talking about. What I'm thinking is that we're some sort of like a B2B, I mean, I guess it could be B2C as well, the software, where you have internal sales or engineering or CCO or whatever. Hey, we need to refactor this application, or hey, we really need to get off of this particular type of database, or hey, we're out of support for this particular library or whatever that we have. We need to upgrade it. And then different people internally are putting items on your roadmap that you have to absorb with your team as a product manager. But I like that. The thing I didn't really think about when I wrote the sticky that just says roadmaps.
Just enough effort. Just enough.
Just in time effort. Just in time effort was the idea of absorbing. Well, maybe what if your clients come to you? What if your customers come to you and it's like, I'll give you money to bump the line on the roadmap.
It happens a lot. And actually, I have experience with that. SOW, here
Yeah.
we go. We see it if it's not on the roadmap, and that's what we've say in the past. Look, it's not, your request is great. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's not within the next 6 months on our roadmap. If you really, really want it, you got to pay for it.
That sounds great. I mean, I would assume it's an assumption. I would assume that if somebody's cutting the line like that and there's a fair amount of money with it, you have the ability now to maybe bring on some people just to accelerate
Exactly.
that particular
That's
development.
exactly
You know, whether they're contractors or just expanding your team or whatever. I don't know. I'm not really getting. That's not really the point of this podcast. Although it could be a podcast of like when to accelerate something versus when to draw down your teams, or I don't know.
We'll put that on the backlog.
We'll put that in the backlog.
My favorite thing to say.
I think the frustration of this item, the roadmaps thing, is something is being served to you that you have no say in. You know, hey, Q2, you need to get integration with this software done. Why? Is anyone going to use that? Is there any money in that?
Yep. I think anybody in the organization should be empowered to ask that question. Why? Why are we doing this? Because if that why isn't understood, guess what? You're going to miss the mark, right?
Yeah.
The other frustration, though, on the other side of roadmaps is when you're tasked with creating it and you spend time doing user research and then nobody wants to follow it.
Yeah.
I think that's even more frustrating as a product person than to be told what to do.
Yeah, I just had that discussion today, so it's super fresh in my mind. It wasn't because I was being pinned down for a roadmap. It was because I would like to make my vision more transparent to the whole company of this is what my roadmap is. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to make a graphic with like Q1, Q2, whatever, and then put it out in an email, and then everyone has now a static image of the roadmap as of February 2022, and then 6 weeks from now, based on where we're at as a business, now the roadmap radically changes. I decide some other, I don't know, maybe some security vulnerability is found, and that now becomes the top priority behind whatever we're have in flight. Now I need to cut that to the front of the line. Like now my roadmap is going to be, well, you promised this feature in Q2. Because in this one picture I have from 3 months ago,
Yep.
it's in Q2. Like I feel that is probably where the frustration of roadmap comes from.
So it becomes an expectation, first of all, right? That's an issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then secondly, to your point, if you have something else, then shuffling it becomes an issue now because people say, well, we're confused. I thought we were doing A, B,
Yes,
C.
exactly right.
So
I
how
told
about-
all my customers that we're doing this.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing we could try is just leave off the timeline and say, this is a bunch of work that's going to happen, right? As far as any given component of that, so like Lego bricks almost. If a customer comes along and wants something, then we will rightly bring it forward.
Yeah.
But this is not a guarantee. It is not a promise. It is a roadmap. Talk about, we could change the word because I'm not a fan of that.
Dude, I
People talk milestones on a roadmap. Like, I'm looking inch stones. Forget milestones.
I almost want to go down the road of saying like, how often should you update your stakeholders on what the roadmap looks like? Like obviously the dashboard concept of like they can just go to the dashboard whenever they want and see what the roadmap looks like. That's the concept I use, and it's great to take that snarky attitude of being like, just go look at the live roadmap and you can figure it out. Like don't ask me to create some special document. That doesn't work for everybody.
No.
Right, that's the counterpoint to this is like, well, especially in larger organizations, I need to predict the next quarter. Some people need to predict way more than a quarter.
They do.
But I need to predict the next quarter. You have to give me some sense of stability. Leadership, you have to give me some sense of stability. I need a roadmap. In that instance, I would suggest that instead of your roadmap being a list of features, your roadmap being a list of either business outcomes or business problems that you're going to solve, and you keep all of the features and all that kind of stuff like kind of hidden underneath that, because the way that you solve it and the amount in which you solve it and the time in which you spend solving it, I guess, all depends on kind of your feedback, your back and forth with the stakeholder.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's like the how also, right? The features are how we're going to solve this issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, just focus on the what. I like that. I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, but like
At leadership level, they're still going to pin you down for specifics because it's the old habits, right?
well,
yes, exactly.
the individual customers might, but like if your roadmap specifies business problems, I think like you're probably in a way better place than 85% of people where their roadmaps are just featureless. Like sales asks for this. Customer, big customer that's 55% of our revenue asks for this or whatever. You know, that's normally what roadmaps are in my experience. A big customer who we can't afford to make angry asks for this. Some VP that we can't afford to make angry asks for this. Some whatever CTO development representative or whatever said we had to stop what we're doing and make sure our database gets backed up automatically or whatever. It's things like that. Yeah. People that were afraid or were walking on eggshells around.
I'm just thinking how this could potentially be used in a company where you could say, well, here are the what's that we're going to work on. These are the business challenges that we're going to tackle, right? And again, the pushback from leadership will be, we need to know when you're delivering all this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that brings us to our actual number 2 item, which is a product. When a product manager starts to look like a project manager, like there are in any product manager's life, I guess there are elements of project management. Like they just creep in. You're not going to get over. Like somebody's going to ask you, when's it going to be done?
Yes.
Either when's it going to be done or how much is it going to cost.
Yes.
They're going to ask you one of those questions. Hopefully it's when's it going to be done, because then you can just give a broad range and be like, well, whatever, I'm out.
It doesn't matter anyway.
It's going to be done between the 1st of January and the 1st of June.
Well, the same answer could apply for budgets too. You know, it'll cost more than $50, but less than $3 million. I jest, but you know what I mean? You could do ranges there too. I usually like to tell people when they say, when's it going to be done? I guarantee them that it'll be done on a day ending in a Y. That's all I know. That's all I know. But this is the old...
Om's not trying to win any popularity contest.
No, I'm not.
either.
No, I'm not. I'm definitely not.
No.
I'm way behind in that queue. No, I think to meet these kinds of things, you have to really understand the why of why they're asking you that. Like, whoever's asking you that, right? They have a reason to ask you that. Yeah. What is that reason? You know, it's usually because of, and then fill in the blanks. So you can now tackle those things, right? If it's because they want to do a budget forecast, well, we can look at that. Because again, you could go back to your earlier point about the business challenges that we're trying to solve and say, in order to solve these, we need these 5 pieces of widgets or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And 1 comes before 2. The other things could shift a little bit. That's about all we know right now. Let the team start working, and then we'll see how they're progressing. And based on that, you could do a straight line projection, right? And then again, give them a range, right? Never give a date.
No. Can't give a date.
Rookie move.
Yeah, definitely a rookie move.
Addressed that before many
You'll
times.
never hit it.
No, that's right.
Never.
Some dates are real dates. Like that's the counterpoint. In the arguing. I don't know. Does arguing Agile work for the product version of this podcast?
I think it works generally. Yeah.
Yeah. Arguing product.
As long as it's in the Agile.
It doesn't have the same
realm.
ring. Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring. In the spirit of arguing about this, which I'm excited about for some reason.
Arguing? Okay.
Some things need a date. I mean, like very, very, very large organizations that are launching marketing initiatives need a date. They need a day to launch their initiative on or whatever, you know. So some dates are set in stone.
Yeah, that and also regulatory dates are usually set in stone as well,
yeah,
right?
Regulatory, yeah, as well. Yeah. I mean, that again doesn't necessarily mean the scope is set in stone.
You can't. I believe you can't have both. You can't have a fixed date and a fixed scope.
Yeah.
One has to be a variable.
What's the last part of the iron triangle?
Fixed cost.
Cost.
Oh, cost. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you got infinite money, I mean,
anything's possible with infinite money.
Call me.
Me too.
I'm glad we got on that topic because it brings us to 2 topics that intersect each other, which is Agile enters the picture too late and engineering enters the picture too late. I mean, really, it could be anybody that enters the picture too late. The typical thing that I specifically have dealt with in my career is Agile enters the picture too late in the software development process, especially in larger companies. Larger companies are notorious for this because they like to do all the analysis up front, and then they like to write all the whatever requirements up front, and then, and only then, when they've had their development leads or whatever involved in the process writing all the requirements up front, then they engage their development teams, their scrum teams, or whatever it is, their agile teams, right? So you've got this, in the middle of your program, you've got this bubble of agility, but on one side of it, you've got your requirements and intake process, all their analysis, all the requirements, and then once your development team is done with it, then you got to go through all this governance process and UAT process and whatever testing processes. So there's a bubble of agility in the middle, but it's waterfall on this side and it's waterfall on this side. And as a product manager, you're kind of sitting there being like, what am I doing in my life?
I think that my experience is more on the bringing in engineers too late.
Yeah.
Where we've got the designer, we've got the customer, we've got, in fact, it just happened to me recently, and we designed this whole thing, and the customer was excited, and okay, it's going to be built, and yay. And then we get to the engineers, and like, we can't do that. And then as the product person, guess who has to go back and tell the customer that you promised something that you really can't build? So engineers, at least the lead engineer or the lead architect, somebody has to be on those calls. And a lot of the time they don't want the engineers on the calls because they're afraid that they're gonna say too much, say too little, speak out of turn. And really they should just be listening and speak up only if necessary.
Man, they're not polished enough.
Exactly, not polished enough.
Polished enough. Oh man, if I had a nickel for the number of times I heard that one, it's like, what do you think these calls are really about?
Right.
They're not polished.
They're not polished enough. Yeah. It's not foreign relations. So yeah, we should definitely get the, I'll call them pointy heads affectionately. We should have them on the calls, and we should have the customers, technical people too, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up having subsequent calls anyway. You may as well just, so in your example, Tricia, right? So what would have happened if somebody on the technical side was on the call on both sides, and when the customer said they wanted XYZ, somebody on your team could say, well, we can't do that, but here's what we can do.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It literally is that simple. I don't understand why people say we don't want technical people on the call. I understand to a certain degree where in the past technical people would just say, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And then it becomes a promise. I understand that. But that's not an insoluble problem. You can definitely coach them and say, hey, listen, this is an initial exploration call.
That's
you know,
exactly
and you
right.
set it up that way with the client. Then nothing we say here shall become a contract. We're just batting ideas back and forth.
That's exactly right. You need to have the right people at the table at the right time. And I think that fails often. And you're right. If you're not going to talk about it up front, it'll be a subsequent conversation. You're not going to get out of it.
No, that's right. Exactly.
If we're going to take the Silicon Valley product management approach, like you get your product manager, again, all these points are from the Marty Kagan book. So like, if we're going to take the Marty Kagan approach, his approach is like, you get the product manager, and basically everywhere the product manager goes, they take their designer with them. And their design person is going to be kind of mocking things up, or throwing something together in a couple of hours or whatever to represent your vision on paper.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, to show what the next step looks like or whatever. And like, it's so minor especially if your engineer at this point is a lead or a solution architect or whatever. You know what I mean? It's so minor to just invite them so that they're at the leading edge of all of the business cases. That seems so minor. I guess I'm trying to fight for what the counterpoint for this would be. I guess the counterpoint for this would be, I've been in a lot of companies where the engineering leads are like, they're so strapped for time, or they're so kind of all over the place that like they're like, oh no, another meeting at the last minute. Yeah. Like, I guess that would be the counterpoint.
It's a soluble problem.
That
is a soluble
agree.
problem. Absolutely, right? Yes, it's a meeting, but it's an important meeting.
And if you don't have time now, what kind of time are you going to have after we just promised somebody something that you're going to have to try to build?
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is to let the customer see how your solution fits in their environment. Why do you think you walk into an IKEA and you can design, in quotes, on their screen, you can lay out your room to see how their furniture would look, right? They even have apps now where you can just point it at a closet or whatever it is, a wardrobe, right? And so why do you think that is?
gotta
right?
fit.
That's
It's gotta
exactly what we're trying to do with a
Yeah,
product.
this one's tough for me because coming from a point in my career being a pseudo business analyst, like this one kind of stings because I don't want to ever go back to a source. Doesn't matter who it is. Anybody bringing requirements to me, I think of them as requirements. Anybody bringing requirements to me, I don't want to have to go back to them and revisit. I want to meet with them once, get everything I need from them, and then like the efficiency of the business analysis process, I want to meet with them once, get everything I need, and then I'm done with them. I don't need to see them again until I have something to show them. If there's the number one thing I could find that just pisses people off is like, hey, I know I met with you one time, and you told me this. Did you really mean this? Or did you, yeah.
No, I didn't. It's all a big
I just
joke.
made it up. Yeah.
The logical segue from engineering or agility being brought in too late to the process would be a product manager who's involved in a company who just can't stop themselves from intaking flawed business cases in the first place. Like if your agility is being brought in too late, or engineering is being brought in too late in the process, you probably already have the problem of flawed business cases driving your roadmaps and driving your development and basically driving your organization. So we probably should have hit this case earlier, or maybe we did already hit this one, flawed business cases. This is probably the crux of where I suggest people go read the Marty Kagan book, The Flawed Business Cases, because if you have a solid structure for discovery in place at your company, you won't run into this problem. Flawed business cases, like where it implies that you aren't doing any kind of metrics. We talk about this all. I feel like we beat this up all the time on the podcast about committing to solve business problems when somebody just knows that's the problem.
Yeah.
Got it.
You don't have to do metrics because I told you this is the problem.
They're lazy.
I mean, it could be it could be lazy, could be ego.
Yeah, and then the P word. It could be politics. We've seen that before.
Most
Sometimes people know, but they don't want to speak up because that's frowned upon in our organization, right? So I'll just go along, right?
That's
We've seen
true,
that
too.
way too often. Which is why I like these smaller, flatter companies,
Yes,
because
so
you can
do I.
just tell whoever and say, look, this is what I think. Ultimately, it's your decision, but you
this
can't
is
say
my
I didn't
opinion.
tell you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Listen to it or not. That's up to you. But at least I can sleep at night.
Yeah, I mean that's all well and good until when the flawed business case doesn't pan out. It's not my fault for proposing the idea. It's your fault for executing the idea. And then
right.
the proposer of the idea, absolve all of my responsibility for forcing whatever X months of development time and basically
Right.
wasting all that money. That's why at my current company, I'm trying to sell the idea of personas as a element in the system. To say we're building this business case, which is you can roll that up to Epic and say this collection of stories. This business case is for this type of user, this persona. We'll say it's persona, and we'll deliver this to this persona. Okay, so you could say that the persona was the one that asked for that business case, but it might also be someone inside the organization. Maybe somebody inside I don't know.
There's still a persona.
Yeah, it's
Still,
still, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's still. Like I am of the idea. Oh, I'm going here, Tricia. I'm so happy, so happy to work this in. At my current company, we disagree on the importance of using personas and tying them to every story. Okay.
I think it's very important.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you took that side. I'm glad that you took that. I'm glad that you took that. Oh, in the arguing agile spirit, arguing agile spirit. I'm glad that we can argue about this one because the trade-off is I'm not really sure that personas are that effective in helping us figure out what's valuable and what's not. That would be the trade-off.
Okay.
It's not a great trade-off, I have to say.
So oftentimes systems, the ALM tools have these generic like icons or whatever you want to call them for personas. I don't like those.
No.
If you can get away with it, definitely talk to the end consumer of whatever you're building and say, we're building this for you. Would you mind if we take a picture of you and use that as the persona and use their name?
Yeah.
Right?
Real.
And now you can say to your team, listen, we're building this for Tricia or Brian. Brian wants this. It's not like, okay, well, we're going to genericize it, Bob, right, or Mary, and there's some weird icon that no
Yeah.
one can relate to.
Yes.
Use their photo. And then get those guys in your reviews to say, yeah, I said
be
I
cool.
wanted this, and I think you've delivered, or you missed it a little bit. I think that closes the loop of
We want to do, Tricia, we want to do a whole episode on personas where we talk about the different templates for
yeah.
personas. And then we, because there's like probably a half a dozen popular templates for establishing personas. There's different little boxes that you fill out, like, oh, what's their pain point? What's their motivation? What's their whatever? There's different things where we do a podcast on building the perfect persona template.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then actually use it do a demonstration for, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 personas.
Sure.
We talked about doing a podcast just on that topic of how to actually establish a user persona. And then we'll give the examples of what a good template looks like, and then we'll actually run through one on the podcast.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think that was really cool. I think because out of all the companies I've ever been with, both permanent and consulting, I think only one company actually seriously used personas and like establish them and then maintain them on a regular basis. Use personas. And it's such a powerful tool that
I
personas
think it
now.
is, and I think the reason why I like them, I think they're more helpful to product people,
Yeah.
especially when you fill it out completely, not just their demographics, but what you said about, I spent a lot of time doing the business model canvas,
Yeah.
which is actually what they teach at Berkeley, their product management class,
Yeah.
which is crazy because I was doing it before I went to that class. But it's the pain points, and I don't remember what they call it in the book, pain points and something else for the other side of it. And I think that as you build that out as a product person and you really, really spend time, maybe even doing customer interviews to build
Yeah.
these personas, you understand your customer better.
Right.
If you're not using that, I mean, maybe it's not. I know I heard one developer once say, oh, it's helpful to understand who we're building this particular story for or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think they're more important. And they do a whole write-up in the business model canvas and the value proposition book that goes with it about how important personas are, and to really, really think hard about what problems are you solving, because solving their pain points is more important than actually the opposite, giving them something they need. Solving their problems is what they care about. Everything else is just like, okay, that's a nice to have.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I think that would be an excellent idea for a podcast.
Man, we're totally intersecting with the Kano model right now. They're like, is this feature like something they're expecting, or is this is
Delight.
This a
A delighter?
Is
Is
this
that
a
what they're called?
delighter?
Yeah.
Like,
Exciters and
You know.
delighters.
Yeah, exciter.
Yeah.
yeah. Like when they click on something, do they see a little?
'Cause how excited can people really be about?
I mean, like the funny thing about the actual delighters, like the actual category of I don't know, up here, down here, I don't remember.
Top right.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like Mike Miller would yell at me right now for not knowing.
I just brought him up the other day.
Oh man, like we need to have him back on.
Yeah,
Definitely.
He would totally yell at me right now for not knowing which category it is. But like when you click on something and it has a little spinning wheel, instead of the spinning wheel, it's like a little dancing shark or whatever nonsense. Like that. Like it's just silly things like that are delighters. The things that you would think would be delighters are not delighters. Like,
Right.
just silly things like that.
We may think they're silly, but to the people that are waiting, looking at a spinner, instead of looking at a spinner when you have no idea how much it's spun or how much it's got left to spin, right? You just put a progress meter on there.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Apple solved that
progress.
ages ago,
Yeah.
right?
Progress
So
is
you know,
helpful.
oh yeah, it's halfway through. It
Yeah.
took 20 seconds.
Yeah,
Roughly, I have
yeah.
about 20 seconds
Right.
left.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then
well,
Microsoft abused the hell out of it. They'll go right to 98 and go back to 7.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like we started on flawed business cases and then we totally abandoned this category. Like the point of I don't think it's possible to talk about flawed business cases without talking about almost anything that we talked about previous to this. Like flawed business cases interacting with the source of ideas that are not vetted out properly, or flawed business cases leading back to roadmap being, I'm going to throw my idea over the fence and then expect that it gets absorbed by the product organization, aka project management, right? the problem with flawed business cases is like whoever's establishing the business case is not required to fill out all the rest of the steps in the business case. Who are the people? Like, what are the risks? Are people going to use it or whatever? Like, oh, why are you making? Yeah, I don't know. Why are you making me? Why are you asking me these questions? Why are you asking? Like, I just want to sell this one single customer. Why are you asking me all these questions of? Will other customers use it? Will it bring down our time from the? I can't remember the business metric of the time to acquire a customer. It's not.
Acquisition cost.
Terrible. Oh my God! Like Brian can't remember basic business metrics. That's welcome to the podcast.
Because nobody uses them.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Oh, thanks for coming to the Agile podcast, where Brian can't remember basic business terminology. The final category that I'd like to bring up is the category of what I feel that probably every single development shop that I've ever worked with, ever seen, ever interacted with, ever finger in the air, heard of, is all the risk is assumed at the end of the software project. I'm going to say project, air quotes project. And whereas we all know all the risks should be knocked down before you commit to development time being invested. So you should say, hey, well, if we build this, will any customers? If we build this, they will.
Will they come?
Like that's the assumption. Like, oh, we'll build it and people will use it. We'll build it and we'll be successful. Everyone in the world will come to use it. But like, how do you know that before you start building something? How do you know? Like, is the way that you know by some kind of metric or survey or something else or trend that you're observing, or are you just assuming and then we'll absorb all the risk after we're done with 4, 5, 6 sprints of work?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what would happen if it doesn't matter what the source of the inspiration, I'll call it, is, right? Development manager, anybody.
Yeah.
What would happen if you included the audience that is actually going to use the product up front, right? They will challenge your assumptions all the way through, and your risk is already being knocked down from the beginning, as opposed to, hey, look what we built. That worked.
Never.
You can count on one hand how many times that's worked. Like, okay, Steve Jobs built the iPod. He didn't go ask anybody, right? We'll talk about this at another time, but there was a precursor to that. Sony had the Walkman. But anyway, so there are very few Steve Jobs in the world now. You have to involve for whom you're building this up front to reduce your risk. Otherwise, it's just a finger in the air.
Well, it's like the famous Zappos story.
Yeah.
I mean, take the time, go buy your shoes, put up a fake website, put up a fake product, have the button not work, but have it track every button. I mean, there's ways to there's no guarantees in life, but you can definitely do some due diligence at a time. And I think there's so many books out there now to tell you how to do this testing. You can do that, the smoke screen. There's different ways, right. Emails, soliciting, a couple people, exactly what you get all of it boils down to getting the customers involved. If you're not going to take the time to vet your idea because you're afraid that it's not a good one, then either you pay for it now or you pay for it later.
Vet somebody else's idea. That's the thing about this discussion point, all the risk being at the end. You're not going to endanger your current standing in the internal politics because it's somebody else's, some executive or your direct boss or some CTO or whatever. It's their idea. And you're not going to endanger your own position by saying, like, maybe your idea is risky.
I would.
And we shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know any other
I'd have no qualms about it.
I don't either. That's my job.
There's ways to do that, obviously, yes. Right? You're not going to tell them they're full of hot air. Do your own testing
and say, these are the metrics usually speak.
You can also spin it around and you can say, that's a great idea, Brian. You're my boss. It's a great idea. Let me just run with that for a bit. And then I'll come back and go, I ran with your idea and here are the results. Yep. Try and be transparent. Go, and I'm not going to tell you your ideas suck, but I will use longer words to say that.
Yeah.
I think
back it up with metrics to your point.
Metrics
Numbers
work all the time.
Bingo.
You can't argue the metrics. And I like that. Let me run with this for a minute. Let me see. Let me do my thing. What any CEO or anybody that runs a company isn't going to argue when you say nobody cares about this idea, and here's proof, because they're only wasting their own money.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, but I think that's your job. I would definitely risk my position because I don't want to build something, because guess who's going to get in trouble, whether it's built or not? One way or the other, it's going to land on me.
Yeah.
So you might as well get it out there first and try.
Well, that's like in the book, the method of we're going to test your idea. We're going to test all the ideas in one way, shape, or form. Okay. But the most expensive way for the company to test an idea is to take it through the entire development process, test it, promote it, whatever, through the environments, and then push it out to the like, that's the most expensive way. So maybe you can come up with a less expensive way to test all the ideas. I think the method here is to come up with some way where you can test all the ideas. And this is going back to what I started before we started the podcast. Come up with some way where you can test all the ideas in some kind of battleground before it gets to development.
Yeah, you want to build like, a crash test for dummies type of thing for software, really, right? Have little sandboxes, bring people in that are the end users, and say, it's not exactly this, but it's going along these lines. What do you think? They go, nope. Okay, throw it away then, right?
Yeah.
Pick the next one.
I agree. And we can't forget about, it's not just money. There's intangibles that you're risking. Your reputation as a company, if you start throwing out crap.
It's huge.
Money can be made.
Yes.
And a lot of these people have a lot of money. I mean, their pockets are very deep, so they might not care about money. So you go in with your reputation might be damaged if you put something out that really people don't like.
That's an excellent point. Reputation damage is many, many, many-fold worse than just financial damage.
Except for on the Agile podcast, where all the money's free. Well, I have no more drink.
That must be the end.
Om is out of drink, too.
I am.
Tricia never had a drink. Never had a drink in the first place.
Well, thank you for staying with us. Those of you that are still here, let us know what you think and smash that like button.
No!
Yeah! Oh, you're not allowed to.
Oh, man.
Well, at least like this one, because I was on it.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
I'm going to think about some more product things that I want to talk about.
All right. Don't think too hard, though.
No, that weakens the team.
We can't, that would require us to put a lot of effort into it, and we're not.
Nah, just enough effort.
Yes.
That's what I'm about.
Just in time effort.
Just in time effort.
Yeah.